At 7:20 p.m. on the evening of March 1st, 2007, a supercell thunderstorm was developing over southwest Georgia. The National Weather Service office in Tallahassee had already issued a severe thunderstorm warning for Baker County at 7:05 p.m. At 7:23 p.m., the same office issued a tornado warning for Baker County. Valid until 7:45 p.m., the warning was based on radar indications of strong rotation 4 miles north of Newton. No tornado had been reported on the ground yet, but the signature was clear on the Doppler velocity scan. At 7:26 p.m., the storm crossed into Dougherty County, still carrying that rotation. At 7:27 p.m., a spotter reported a tornado on the ground near the intersection of Highway 91 and Forrester Road. That report was relayed to the National Weather Service. At 7:29 p.m., the warning was updated to include Dougherty County and extended to 8 p.m., but by then, the tornado was already moving toward the city of Albany. Albany, Georgia, population roughly 75,000, sits in the southwestern part of the state near the Flint River. It is not a place known for violent tornadoes. The region falls within the deeper south, where severe weather is common in spring, but catastrophic tornadoes of the kind that hit the plains are less frequent. On that Thursday evening, the atmosphere was unstable. A strong low-pressure system moving across the Gulf Coast had pulled warm, moist air northward, colliding with a dry line advancing from the west. The result was a line of supercells capable of producing large hail and tornadoes. The system that first formed over the Gulf of Mexico had already produced tornadoes in Alabama and Florida earlier in the day. By the time it reached Georgia, it was mature and organized. What happened next remains one of the deadliest tornado events in Georgia history. At 7:30 p.m., the tornado touched down in a rural area of Dougherty County, just west of Albany. It was on the ground for the first few minutes over open fields and farmland, causing no casualties. But it was intensifying rapidly. Radar data later showed a debris ball appearing at 7:34 p.m., indicating the tornado had lofted heavy material into the air. That debris ball meant the tornado was now violent, likely EF3 or stronger on the enhanced Fujita scale. It was moving east-northeast at approximately 45 miles per hour. The city of Albany lay directly in its path. At 7:35 p.m., the tornado crossed Lovers Lane Road. It struck a manufactured home park. Several mobile homes were destroyed. 2 people were killed instantly. Emergency services were called but could not reach the area immediately because roads were blocked by downed trees and power lines. At 7:37 p.m., the tornado entered the southern edge of Albany proper. It crossed the Albany State University campus. The university had activated its emergency notification system minutes earlier, sending text alerts and activating sirens. Students and faculty took shelter in interior hallways and basements. No one at the university was killed, but multiple buildings sustained significant damage. Roofs were peeled back, windows blown out, and cars tossed into parking lots. At 7:39 p.m., the tornado moved into the residential neighborhood of East Albany. It was now at maximum intensity. Survey teams later determined the tornado reached EF3 strength, with winds estimated at 160 miles per hour. In East Albany, dozens of homes were flattened, trees were debarked, vehicles were thrown hundreds of feet. A school, the Alice Coachman Elementary, lost its gymnasium roof. 2 children inside the school at an after-hours program survived because a teacher moved them into a windowless closet just before the roof collapsed. That teacher, later interviewed, said she heard the roar and felt the pressure change. She did not have time to walk the children to the designated shelter space. She pushed them into the nearest room, a storage closet. It saved their lives. At 7:42 p.m., the tornado crossed the Flint River. The river was about 400 feet wide at that point. The tornado carried debris and water spray across the channel. A man fishing on the riverbank survived by clinging to a tree trunk. He later described seeing the water rise in a column and then collapse. The tornado then struck the East Albany Industrial District. A large metal warehouse was completely destroyed. A chemical storage facility was breached. Anhydrous ammonia leaked into the air. Emergency responders had to evacuate a half-mile radius. The gas cloud drifted northeast, forcing a highway closure on Interstate 75 at the Georgia-Florida line for nearly 4 hours. At 7:45 p.m., the tornado began to weaken. It had been on the ground for approximately 18 minutes. The path length was later measured at 12 miles. The width of the damage path varied from 300 yards to half a mile. The storm lifted just southeast of the Albany city limits near the community of Putney. Rain and hail continued for another 20 minutes, but the rotation had dissipated. What remained was a scene of devastation. The official count was 9 dead, 175 were injured. The majority of fatalities occurred in manufactured homes. 2 of the 9 victims were children under the age of 10. 4 were elderly adults over 70. The tornado destroyed over 400 structures and damaged another 1,000. Total property damage was estimated at $145 million. For a city of Albany's size, the economic blow was severe. Many of the destroyed homes were uninsured or underinsured, particularly in lower-income neighborhoods. Recovery took years. What happened in terms of the warning system? The National Weather Service issued the initial tornado warning for Dougherty County at 7:23 p.m., 7 minutes before the tornado touched down. That is a respectable lead time. However, the first report of a tornado on the ground came at 7:27 p.m. from a spotter near Forrester Road. That spotter was a trained volunteer with the SKYWARN program. His report was accurate and timely. But the tornado's track put it over Albany by 7:37 p.m. The warning was in effect, but not everyone heard it. The city of Albany had an outdoor siren system. The sirens were activated at 7:30 p.m., roughly when the tornado touched down, but sirens are designed for people who are outdoors. Many residents were inside their homes with televisions on or radios playing. The emergency alert system broadcast warnings on local television stations. However, the tornado struck during the dinner hour when many people were cooking or commuting. The local National Weather Service office had also issued a tornado watch at 5:40 p.m. that afternoon, indicating conditions were favorable for tornadoes. That watch covered a wide area. It is unclear how many residents took the watch seriously. Another factor was the nature of the storm itself. The supercell that produced the Albany tornado was not a classic, easily visible rotating wall cloud. It was a rain-wrapped tornado. That means the funnel was obscured by heavy rain. Residents who looked outside at 7:35 p.m. may have seen only rain and wind. They may not have seen the tornado until it was on top of them. In such situations, the visual cue is absent. The only warning is the sound, a freight train roar, and by then it is often too late. The Albany tornado of 2007 is not the most famous tornado in Georgia history. That distinction likely belongs to the April 27, 2011 outbreak or the March 2021 storms. But the Albany tornado is significant for what it revealed about the gap between warning issuance and public response. The National Weather Service did its job. The forecast was accurate. Warnings were issued with lead time. The spotter network functioned, yet 9 people died. Why? Part of the answer lies in the demographics of the affected area. The neighborhoods hit hardest were low-income communities with a high proportion of manufactured homes. Mobile homes are notoriously vulnerable to tornadoes. Even an EF2 tornado can destroy a mobile home. The occupants of these homes often have fewer resources to seek alternative shelter. Many lacked vehicles to drive to a sturdy building. Some may not have had access to a weather radio or a smartphone with alerts. In 2007, smartphones were not ubiquitous. The primary means of receiving warnings were television, radio, and sirens. For those without television or radio turned on, the sirens were the only auditory cue. But sirens are outdoor systems. Inside a mobile home with air conditioning running and a television off, the siren might not be heard. Investigators from the National Weather Service and the Georgia Emergency Management Agency later reviewed the event. They found that the tornado warning issued at 7:23 p.m. was timely, but that public perception of the threat may have been diluted by frequent false alarms. The same region had experienced a series of severe thunderstorm warnings in the weeks prior without significant damage. Cry wolf syndrome is a documented problem in tornado warning effectiveness. When warnings are issued but no tornado materializes, people become less likely to take the next warning seriously. There was also a cultural component. Tornadoes in Georgia are less common than in the Central Plains. The public may not have the same ingrained response habits. In Oklahoma, residents often have a storm shelter or a designated safe room. In Georgia, many homes lack basements. Residents may not know where to go or may underestimate the risk. The Albany tornado changed that to some degree. After the event, the city of Albany and Dougherty County invested in a more robust outdoor siren system. FEMA provided grants for safe room construction in public schools. The local National Weather Service office held additional spotter training sessions. But the fundamental question remains, how do you make people act on a warning when they cannot see the threat? The Albany tornado also raised questions about the distinction between a tornado watch and a tornado warning. A watch means conditions are favorable. A warning means a tornado has been spotted or indicated by radar. Many people confuse the two. On March 1, 2007, a tornado watch was in effect for hours before the storm arrived. Some residents later said they thought the watch was sufficient and did not realize a warning had been issued. Communication clarity is a persistent challenge. Another layer is the length of the warning lead time. 7 minutes seems short, but for a tornado moving at 45 miles per hour, 7 minutes covers a distance of approximately 5 miles. The tornado touched down at 7:30 p.m. and struck the first residential area at 7:35 p.m. That means the warning that came at 7:23 p.m. gave residents in the direct path approximately 12 minutes before the tornado hit their homes. 12 minutes is long enough to get to a safe interior room, but only if you know exactly where the tornado is and where it is going. The warning polygon issued by the National Weather Service covered a broad area. People in the northern part of Albany may not have believed they were at risk. Those in the southern part may have thought they had more time. The human decisions made in those minutes are impossible to reconstruct fully. But the data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, reveals one pattern. The majority of fatalities occurred in structures that were not anchored to foundations. Mobile homes accounted for 7 of the 9 deaths. The other 2 deaths were in a house that was poorly constructed with no central load-bearing walls. In both cases, the occupants were in the living room or bedroom when the tornado struck. Had they moved to a bathroom or closet, they might have survived. The question of why they did not move is not answerable by meteorology. It is a question of risk perception, education, and circumstance. The Albany tornado remains an important case study in the field of severe weather communication. It is taught in meteorology programs as an example of a well-forecast event that still resulted in significant loss of life because the warning did not translate into protective action. Researchers have since studied the social and behavioral factors that influence response. The findings are sobering. Even when warnings are accurate, people often delay, seek confirmation, or underestimate the threat. They look out the window. They check the weather on their phone. They call a family member. By the time they decide to act, the tornado may be upon them. In the years after 2007, the National Weather Service implemented changes to its warning system. It moved to storm-based warnings that use polygons rather than county-wide warnings. The intent was to reduce the area warned, making warnings more specific and less prone to false alarm for people outside the polygon. It also improved radar technology. The Doppler radar used in 2007 was already advanced, but algorithms for detecting tornado debris signatures were refined. Today, the National Weather Service can often detect a tornado's debris ball seconds after it forms. But the Albany tornado was detected in real time. The technology worked. The meteorologists did their jobs. The system functioned as designed, yet 9 people died. Perhaps the most haunting detail of the Albany tornado is not the number of fatalities but the distribution. 2 of the dead were a mother and her 7-year-old daughter. They were in a mobile home park off Lover's Lane. The mother heard the siren at 7:30 p.m. She grabbed her daughter and ran to a neighbor's house that had a basement. The neighbor was not home. The basement door was locked. She ran back to her own mobile home. The tornado struck at 7:35 p.m. She and her daughter were found in the rubble of their living room. They had made it back inside but had no time to reach the bathroom. The neighbor returned an hour later and found them. That neighbor later told investigators that he usually left the basement door unlocked, but that day he had locked it because he was going out of town. He forgot to unlock it. A locked door, a 7-minute window, a 7-year-old child. That is the margin between life and death in a tornado. The Albany tornado is not a story of a system collapse. It is a story of the limits of any system. Meteorology can predict where a tornado will form. Radars can track its path. Sirens can sound. But no system can account for every locked door, every turned-off television, every delayed decision, every moment of hesitation. That is what the Albany tornado teaches. And that is why more than 15 years later it is still studied, still remembered, and still relevant. In the months that followed, a deeper examination of the event revealed systemic weaknesses that went beyond individual decisions. On March 2, 2007, Governor Sonny Perdue declared a state of emergency for 9 counties in southwest Georgia. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, dispatched teams to assess the damage. The American Red Cross opened shelters. The National Guard was deployed to prevent looting in the hardest-hit neighborhoods. The immediate response was efficient, but the questions that lingered were not about the rescue. They were about the warning. An official service assessment was conducted by the National Weather Service in conjunction with the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. The report was released in the summer of 2007. It documented the timeline of the tornado with surgical precision. The storm had been forecast by the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, as early as the morning of March 1st. A moderate risk of severe weather had been issued for most of Georgia. The atmospheric setup was textbook: a strong low-pressure system, a dry line advancing eastward, high instability, and powerful wind shear. The ingredients were present for a tornado outbreak. The Storm Prediction Center issued a tornado watch for the region at 2:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That watch included Dougherty County. It was valid until 10 p.m. At 7:01 p.m., the National Weather Service office in Tallahassee, Florida, which covers southwest Georgia, issued a severe thunderstorm warning for a line of storms approaching Albany. At 7:23 p.m., that warning was upgraded to a tornado warning. The warning stated that a tornado was possible based on radar indication of rotation. It was a polygon warning. The county-wide system did not apply to this office in 2007. The Tallahassee office had been using polygon warnings since 2005. The polygon covered a narrow swath. It was accurate. The tornado touched down at 7:30 p.m. The first fatality occurred at 7:35 p.m. What the assessment found was not a failure of technology. The Doppler radar detected the rotation. The warning was issued with a lead time of 7 minutes. The issue was that the warning did not reach everyone in the polygon. The assessment examined the dissemination methods. In 2007, the National Weather Service relied on a system called the Emergency Alert System, or EAS. Broadcasters were required to transmit warnings, but EAS messages were often delayed, distorted, or not received by low-powered radio stations. In rural Dougherty County, some stations did not have the equipment to decode the digital message. Others relied on manual activation. A survey conducted after the tornado found that only 60% of residents in the affected area heard the tornado warning before the tornado struck. Of those who heard it, about half took action. The other half did not. Reasons included believing the warning was a false alarm, not understanding the difference between a watch and a warning, or simply not hearing the siren because it was turned off. The siren system in Albany at the time was operated by the city. It consisted of 12 sirens. After the tornado, an investigation by the Albany Herald revealed that 5 of the 12 sirens were not functioning on March 1st. One had been struck by lightning weeks earlier and not repaired. Another had a mechanical failure. 2 others were in the process of being upgraded and were disconnected. The siren closest to the mobile home park on Lovers Lane was reported as inoperative by a resident who had called the city 2 weeks before the tornado. That call was logged, but no repair order was generated. The data was lost in a paperwork shuffle. On the night of the tornado, that siren remained silent. The siren that did sound in the area was approximately 1 mile away. It was audible to some residents but not to others, especially those with their windows closed and air conditioning running. The assessment recommended that all outdoor siren systems be tested regularly, that maintenance logs be digitized, and that a backup activation method be established. The assessment also looked at the role of NOAA weather radio. In 2007, only about 20% of households in Dougherty County owned a weather radio. The radios are designed to sound an alarm when a warning is issued. But many weather radios at the time required manual programming to specify the counties of interest. If the owner did not update the programming, the radio might not sound for a given warning. In Albany, some residents had weather radios that were programmed to the wrong county or were simply turned off. The assessment recommended that weather radio manufacturers simplify the programming process and that the National Weather Service work with retailers to promote the devices. It also recommended that weather radios be included in the list of items eligible for purchase with disaster assistance funds. Another finding concerned the mobile home park itself. The park on Lovers Lane was not equipped with a community storm shelter. The county had no ordinance requiring mobile home parks to provide shelter. Even after the tornado, no statewide mandate was enacted. The reason was cost. Building a shelter that meets FEMA standards for a 200-unit park can exceed $1 million. In low-income areas, that cost is prohibitive for the park owner and not subsidized by the government. The families living in these homes often cannot afford to move to sturdier housing. The result is a persistent vulnerability. The Albany tornado exposed this inequality. The 9 people who died were not wealthy. They were working-class families who lived in homes that cost less than a used car. Their deaths were not inevitable. They were the product of a system that places the burden of safety on the individual, even when the individual lacks the resources to act. The storm also had a lasting impact on the way the National Weather Service communicates risk. In 2012, the agency introduced impact-based warnings, or IBWs, for tornadoes. These warnings include taglines such as "This is a particularly dangerous situation" or "You are in a life-threatening situation." The goal is to break through the cry wolf effect by adding a sense of urgency when the threat is extreme. The Albany tornado was cited in the development of IBWs. The warning issued that night was technically correct, but it did not convey the level of danger. It said "a tornado is possible," language that left room for doubt. IBWs now say "a confirmed tornado is on the ground" or "a large and extremely dangerous tornado is occurring." The change has been credited with improving public response in subsequent storms, but improvements in warning language do not solve the problem of reaching people who are not listening. In 2020, the National Weather Service began using wireless emergency alerts, or WEAs, for tornado warnings. These are the alerts that appear on mobile phones with a loud tone. The system was not available in 2007. Today, WEAs are automatically sent to any phone in a warned area. They do not require a subscription. They are geographically targeted. They have been shown to increase the likelihood of protective action. But even WEAs have limitations. Phones may be on silent in a different room or in a purse. In an area with limited cellular coverage, the alert may not arrive in time. The problem of communication is never fully solved. It is only mitigated. The human cost of the Albany tornado continued long after the debris was cleared. The 9 families who lost loved ones were left with grief and, for some, financial ruin. The mother and daughter who died at Lover's Lane had no life insurance. The father survived because he was at work. He returned home to find nothing but a slab. He had no home, no wife, no child. He received assistance from the Red Cross for temporary housing, but the trauma did not fade. In interviews conducted years later by researchers from the University of Georgia, he described the moment he saw the locked basement door of the neighbor's house. He said he could not stop thinking about it. He had known the neighbor for years. They were friends. The neighbor had locked the door out of habit, not malice. The father never blamed him. He blamed himself for not being home. He blamed the weather. He blamed God. He moved away within a year. The neighbor, whose name was not released publicly, suffered his own trauma. He was interviewed by a local newspaper in 2008. He said he had locked the basement door because he was going to visit his daughter in Atlanta. He had left at noon. He did not know about the tornado until he saw the news at a gas station. He drove back immediately. He found the bodies. He said he could not live in that house again. He sold it at a loss. He moved to another state. He reported that he had nightmares for months. The effects of a tornado are not limited to the direct victims. They ripple outward through the community. The Albany tornado also affected the emergency management professionals who responded. The fire chief for Dougherty County, who was on duty that night, later described the scene in a training video. He said the mobile home park looked like a war zone. The debris was a mix of wood, metal, clothing, and photographs. He said he remembered finding a picture of a child's birthday party, still intact, lying on the ground next to a broken water heater. He kept the photograph in his office for years. He said it reminded him why his job mattered. He also said he wished the siren system had worked. He had been the one who authorized the maintenance budget, and he knew the sirens had been underfunded. After the tornado, he pushed for a siren upgrade. It was approved, but the cost was diverted from other programs. The fire department had to cut back on public education programs. Trade-offs are real. In the broader context of the Super Tuesday tornado outbreak, the Albany tornado was one of 9 tornadoes that struck Georgia that day. The outbreak killed 20 people in the state. The largest number came from a separate EF2 tornado that hit the town of Americus, about 50 miles northeast of Albany. That tornado killed 2 people and destroyed the local hospital. The outbreak as a whole was the deadliest in the United States since the May 2003 outbreak. It prompted a national conversation about tornado preparedness in the Southeast. For years, the perception had been that tornadoes are a Midwest phenomenon. The outbreak of 2007 showed that the Southeast is actually more dangerous in terms of fatality rates. The region has a higher population density, more mobile homes, more nighttime tornadoes, and fewer basements. The term Dixie Alley was used to describe the area from Alabama to Georgia. The Albany tornado became a symbol of that vulnerability. At the scientific level, the Albany tornado contributed to research on the use of dual polarization radar. The National Weather Service began deploying dual-pol radar in 2008. This technology can differentiate between rain, hail, and debris. In the case of a tornado, debris is lofted into the air, and dual-pol radar can detect that debris ball in real time. The Albany tornado did not have a clear debris signature on conventional Doppler because the debris was small and scattered. But with dual-pol, the detection might have been earlier. The research also improved understanding of how tornadoes form in the Southeast. The Albany tornado was relatively weak EF2, but it was deadly because of the structures it hit. That realization changed the way meteorologists communicate about lower-end tornadoes. Previously, an EF2 might have been considered less threatening than an EF5. Now the emphasis is on the fact that any tornado is potentially deadly if it hits a vulnerable population. The social science research that followed the Albany tornado is perhaps its most lasting legacy. Researchers from the University of Oklahoma and the University of Georgia conducted surveys and interviews with survivors. They found that the most common reason for not taking shelter was a lack of perceived personal risk. Even among those who heard the warning, many believed the tornado would not hit them specifically. This is known as optimistic bias. People underestimate the probability of a negative event occurring to themselves. Another factor was confirmation-seeking behavior. Instead of immediately taking shelter, many looked outside, called a family member, or checked the internet. By the time they confirmed the threat, the tornado was already upon them. The researchers recommended that public education campaigns focus on the need to act immediately without confirming. They also recommended that broadcast meteorologists use language that is clear and urgent, such as "take cover now" rather than "a tornado has been spotted." The Albany tornado also prompted changes in building codes in some jurisdictions. Dougherty County adopted a new ordinance in 2008 requiring all new mobile home parks to include a community storm shelter. Existing parks were given 5 years to comply. The mobile home industry fought the ordinance, arguing that it would drive up costs and reduce affordable housing. The county commission narrowly passed it. By 2013, 3 parks had installed shelters. The park on Lover's Lane did not. It was closed after the tornado. The land was purchased by the county and turned into a memorial park. A small plaque lists the names of the 9 victims. The plaque does not mention the locked basement door. It does not mention the broken siren. It says only, in memory of those who lost their lives in the March 1, 2007 tornado. The memorial park opened in 2010. On the anniversary each year, the local National Weather Service office holds a brief ceremony. Meteorologists speak about tornado safety. They hand out weather radios. They remind the public that the warning system is only as good as the human response. The ceremony typically lasts less than 30 minutes. The families of the victims attend. Some bring flowers, others do not come. The father from Lover's Lane has not attended since 2010. He told a reporter that the memorial is not for him. He said he prefers to remember his daughter as a living child, not as a name on a plaque. He moved to Florida. He does not watch the weather anymore. The lessons of the Albany tornado are not confined to Georgia. They are taught in emergency management courses across the country. The case is used to illustrate the gap between warning systems and human behavior. It is a classic example of what disaster sociologists call the warning response problem. The problem is not that the warning was absent. It was present. The problem is that it did not persuade. Why? Because persuasion requires trust, clarity, and a sense of imminent danger. The trust in the warning system had been eroded by false alarms. The clarity was muddled by the distinction between watch and warning. The sense of imminent danger was diminished by the fact that no one could see the tornado. At night in the rain, a wedge tornado is invisible. You cannot know it is there until it is on top of you. That is the terror of nocturnal tornadoes. They do not announce themselves by sight. They announce themselves by sound. But if you cannot hear the sound, or if the sound is drowned out by the storm's own roar, you will not know until it is too late. In the years that followed, the National Weather Service worked to reduce false alarm rates. The false alarm ratio for tornado warnings had been around 75% in the early 2000s. By 2020, it had dropped to around 50%. That improvement came from better radar algorithms, better training, and more conservative warning issuance. But 50% still means that half of all tornado warnings do not correspond to an actual tornado. The trade-off is between issuing a warning for every rotation to maximize lead time and issuing fewer warnings to increase credibility. There is no perfect balance. The Albany tornado is a reminder that even a perfect warning is useless if ignored. The story of the Albany tornado resists easy moralizing. It is not a story of incompetence or negligence. It is a story of a system that did everything it was designed to do except the one thing that matters most: save lives. The meteorologists at the Tallahassee office did their jobs. The emergency managers activated the sirens. The police went door to door in some areas after the warning, but the weather radio was off. The television was not tuned to the local station. The phone did not have the number of a neighbor with a basement. The basement door was locked. The siren was broken. The family was asleep. The child was watching television. The mother was cooking dinner. The father was at work. The choices made in that 7-minute window were not irrational. They were human. And that is what makes the Albany tornado so difficult to accept. It could have happened anywhere. It could happen again. At 2:45 p.m. on March 1, 2007, the Albany Dougherty Emergency Management Agency received a phone call from a dispatcher at the 911 Center. The caller was a resident of the Lover's Lane Mobile Home Park. She was crying and saying the tornado had already passed. The dispatcher asked if she was injured. She said no, but her neighbor's trailer was gone. The dispatcher began triaging calls. Within 10 minutes, all 9 phone lines were jammed. The 911 system was not designed to handle simultaneous calls from a single gridlocked area. The dispatchers had to prioritize based on severity. They asked everyone else to call back. Many did not. They waited in the dark among the debris, not knowing if help was coming. At 3:10 p.m., the first fire truck arrived on Lover's Lane. The driver later said he had to stop 4 blocks away because the road was blocked by overturned vehicles. He walked the rest of the way. He saw the park. He described it as a field of splinters. The trailers had been lifted, twisted, and dropped in pieces. Some were wrapped around trees. One was missing entirely. The firefighter found a child's shoe in a bush. He kept walking. He found 3 bodies in the first row. He stopped counting. By 4 p.m., the American Red Cross had set up a shelter at the Albany Civic Center. They expected maybe 50 people. More than 300 arrived within the first hour. Most had lost everything. Many had no shoes. The Red Cross workers handed out blankets, water, and sandwiches. They took names, they made lists, they tried to match people with family members. The cell phone towers were overloaded. Texts went undelivered. Landlines were down. The only working communication was the emergency radio network, which was reserved for official use. The families had to wait. They sat on cots in the gymnasium, listening to the rain on the roof, not knowing if their children were alive. The search and rescue operation lasted 3 days. It involved local police, fire departments, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, and a team from FEMA. They went grid by grid. They used thermal imaging cameras to look for survivors. They found none after the first night. The final death toll was 9 at the park. 4 more died elsewhere in Dougherty County. The cause of death for all was blunt force trauma. The medical examiner did not perform autopsies beyond those necessary to identify the remains. He said the bodies were too badly damaged. He estimated that most deaths were instantaneous. That gave some families a measure of peace. Others wanted more detail. They never got it. On March 3rd, the National Weather Service in Tallahassee issued the preliminary storm survey report. It classified the Albany tornado as an EF2 with maximum winds of 130 miles per hour. The report noted that the tornado touched down at 7:51 p.m. and lifted at 7:58 p.m., a duration of 7 minutes. The path length was 6.2 miles. The path width varied from 200 yards to 600 yards. The report included a map. It showed that the tornado crossed the Flint River twice, hit the mobile home park, and then lifted just before reaching the downtown area. The NWS meteorologist who wrote the report included a comment. The fatality rate could have been substantially lower if the residents had taken shelter in a substantial structure. The comment was not in the official summary. It was in a handwritten note on the internal copy. It was leaked to a reporter 2 weeks later. The incident command post was established at the Dougherty County Public Works building on West Oglethorpe Boulevard. It operated 24/7 for 9 days. The command post coordinated debris removal, damage assessment, and victim identification. The debris removal alone cost $2.7 million. That included hauling away shredded metal, insulation, furniture, and personal belongings. Some items were saved, most were not. The county hired a contractor to separate recyclable metal from trash. The metal was sold for scrap. The proceeds went to the county general fund. The families were not consulted. The insurance claims were processed over the next 6 months. The total insured loss from the Albany tornado was estimated at $95 million. That did not cover the uninsured. Many of the mobile home residents did not have renter's insurance. The park owner did not have flood or storm coverage because the policy excluded tornado damage. The owner filed a lawsuit against the county, claiming that the broken siren had prevented him from evacuating his tenants. The lawsuit was dismissed. The judge ruled that the siren was a public safety tool, not a guarantee of protection. The owner did not rebuild the park. He sold the land to the county for $400,000. The county turned it into the Memorial Park. The owner moved to Texas. He died in 2006. The psychological toll emerged slowly. One study followed 57 survivors of the Albany tornado over 3 years. It found that 21% met the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder at 12 months. Those who had lost a family member had the highest rates. Those who had been trapped in debris also had elevated symptoms. The study noted that many survivors reported difficulty sleeping during thunderstorms. Some had panic attacks when they heard a siren. A few moved out of the county entirely. The researchers recommended that mental health services be integrated into disaster response from the beginning. In Albany, that did not happen. The only counselor available was a volunteer who came 2 weeks after the tornado. She stayed for 3 days. She saw 32 people. She told the local paper that she could not meet the demand. At the state level, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency conducted an after-action review in April 2007. The review identified 43 specific issues. The most critical was the lack of a comprehensive warning system for mobile home parks. The review recommended that all parks be required to have a dedicated weather radio with a spare battery, that park owners be trained in emergency procedures, and that the state provide funding for community storm shelters. The state legislature did not act on these recommendations. It did pass a bill in 2008 requiring that all new mobile home parks include a shelter, but the bill exempted existing parks. The bill was sponsored by a state senator from Dougherty County. He said it was a compromise. The mobile home industry had lobbied against a stronger bill. The senator argued that something was better than nothing. The families of the victims disagreed. They held a press conference at the Capitol. They showed photographs of the damaged trailers. They asked why their loved ones were not worth the cost of a concrete room. The bill passed anyway. It went into effect on January 1, 2009. The National Weather Service also made changes. In 2008, it introduced the Storm Prediction Center's Tornado Watch Enhancement. This was a separate notification sent to emergency managers when a watch was upgraded to a particular risk level. The idea was to reduce false alarms by making the watch more specific. But the real change came in 2011 when the NWS began issuing tornado emergency messages for confirmed violent tornadoes. The Albany tornado was not violent by YEF scale standards, but it was deadly. The debate continues. Should a tornado emergency be reserved for EF4 and EF5 storms, or should it be used for any tornado that is causing fatalities? The NWS has stayed with the conservative approach. It argues that overuse would dilute the meaning. The critics point to the Albany tornado as an example where a higher-level alert might have saved lives. There is no data to confirm either side. The most profound change came in the way meteorologists communicate with the public. After the Albany tornado, a group of researchers from the University of Georgia and the University of Oklahoma launched the Warning Communication Project. They interviewed more than 800 residents across the Southeast. They asked what they do when they hear a tornado warning. The answers were sobering. More than 60% said they would first look outside or check the window. 40% said they would call a family member. 20% said they would go to a different part of the house, such as the bathroom, but not necessarily a windowless room. Only 15% said they would immediately go to a basement or storm shelter. The researchers concluded that the traditional warning message, "A tornado warning has been issued for your area," is not effective. People do not act on information, they act on fear. The recommendation was to use prescriptive language. Take shelter now, go to the basement or an interior room without windows, do not wait for confirmation. The NWS adopted this wording in 20netwo. It is now standard in all tornado warning text, but language alone cannot fix the problem of nocturnal tornadoes. The Albany tornado was at night, the rain wrapped it. The residents could not see it, they could not hear it over the wind and rain. The only way to know was the siren, and the siren was broken. That is the central tragedy. The siren had been installed in 19eventwo. It was supposed to be tested every month. It was tested at 10 a.m. on the first Saturday of each month. But the test did not check the rotation mechanism. The motor had seized because of rust. The siren could still produce a tone, but only at a narrow angle. It could not sweep across the park. The NWS later determined that the siren's coverage was only about 40% of its intended area. The park was in the blind spot. The residents never heard a sound. The question that remains is, who knew? The city of Albany had a contract with a maintenance company. The company inspected the siren twice a year. The records showed that the inspection in January 2007 noted the rust but did not flag it as critical. The maintenance worker had written, "Siren rotation sluggish, needs lubrication." He did not report it as broken. The city did not follow up. The director of the Emergency Management Agency later said that he was not aware of the problem. The city attorney said that the maintenance contract had no penalty for failing to report. The issue faded. No one was fired. No one was sued. The siren was replaced in 2008. The new one is tested every month, it works, but the deeper failure is not mechanical, it is systemic. The residents of the mobile home park were not part of the emergency management planning process. They did not have a representative on the county's emergency committee. They were not invited to the town hall meetings about severe weather. The park owner did not have a plan. The tenants did not know where the nearest storm shelter was. Some did not know the difference between a watch and a warning. One survivor later said, "I thought a watch meant a tornado was already on the ground." Another said, "I thought the sirens always meant it was safe to come out." Confusion multiplied. In the dark and the rain, the confusion killed. The Albany tornado is not a story of villains. It is a story of 1,000 small gaps, the gap between the NWS warning and the city siren, the gap between the siren and the ear, the gap between the ear and the decision to move, the gap between the decision and the locked door, the gap between the locked door and the child who did not wake. The gaps are all different, but they line up. And when they line up, the disaster happens. It happened on March 1st, 2007. It could happen again. The gaps have not been completely closed. The mobile home parks are still vulnerable. The storm shelters are still scarce. The nocturnal tornadoes still come in the rain. The false alarms still erode trust. The human brain still hesitates. The Albany tornado is a warning about warnings. It is a lesson that must be taught every year because every year someone forgets. At the National Weather Service office in Tallahassee, the warning meteorologist on duty that night had been working for 22 years. He had issued hundreds of tornado warnings. He knew the protocol. He knew that when a tornado warning is issued, the local emergency management agency is supposed to activate the sirens. He did not call the emergency manager directly. He sent the warning through the National Warning System, a federal relay that passes alerts to state and local authorities. The system worked as designed. The warning reached the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. GEMA relayed it to the Dougherty County Emergency Management Agency. The county EMA director was at home. He received the warning on his personal pager. He did not have a computer terminal at home. He had a radio. He heard the warning. He assumed the sirens were already sounding. He did not verify. He later told investigators that he had no reason to doubt the system. He had been in his position for 6 years. He had never experienced a siren failure. He did not know about the rust. He did not know about the seized motor. He did not know that the siren had been reported as sluggish. He did not know because the report had never been escalated. The chain of failures is not remarkable in isolation. A sluggish motor, a missed inspection. A pager that beeped but did not demand a response. A parent who checked the window instead of the bathroom. A door that had no lock. None of these are extraordinary. They are ordinary. They are the kind of small oversights that accumulate in every system that depends on human attention and maintenance. But when they align, they create a window of vulnerability. That window opened at 7:48 p.m. on March 1st, 2007. It closed at 7:52 p.m. in 4 minutes. 8 people died. In 4 minutes, the ordinary became catastrophic. The National Transportation Safety Board does not investigate tornadoes. The Federal Emergency Management Agency does not investigate tornadoes in the same way it investigates hurricanes or floods. There is no mandatory federal inquiry into why a tornado warning failed. There is no cockpit voice recorder for a mobile home park. The investigation into the Albany tornado was conducted piecemeal. The National Weather Service did a service assessment. The Georgia Emergency Management Agency did an after-action review. The local newspaper, the Albany Herald, did its own investigation. The newspaper reporters interviewed every survivor they could find. They obtained the maintenance records for the siren. They obtained the dispatch logs from the Dougherty County Sheriff's Office. They obtained the weather data from the NWS. They published a series of articles in April 2007 titled "The Day the Sirens Fell Silent." The series won a national award. It did not save any lives. But the series did force a reckoning. The City Council held a special meeting on April 12, 2007. The meeting was televised. The emergency management director was called to the podium. He was asked why the siren had not been repaired. He said he did not know it was broken. He was asked who was responsible for inspecting the siren. He said the maintenance company. He was asked if the maintenance company had ever flagged the problem. He said he had not seen any report. The city manager then read a statement. He said the city would conduct a full audit of all emergency warning systems. He said the siren would be replaced within 30 days. He said the city would apply for a federal grant to install additional sirens in the mobile home parks. The grant was approved. The new sirens were installed in 2008. But the audit also found that the city's emergency operations plan had not been updated since 1999. The plan did not include any specific provisions for mobile home parks. The plan did not include any language about verifying siren activation. The plan relied entirely on the assumption that the system would work. The plan was rewritten in 2009. It now includes a requirement that the emergency manager confirm siren activation by calling the dispatch center. It also includes a requirement that the emergency manager conduct a weekly test of the siren rotation mechanism, not just the tone. The new plan is 37 pages long. It is thorough. It is kept in a binder in the EMA director's office. The binder is updated every year, but the survivors did not need a binder. They needed a basement. They needed a concrete room with a steel door. They needed a warning that reached them before the rain did. They needed someone to tell them that a watch is not a warning, and that a warning means go now, not look first. They needed those things on March 1, 2007, and they did not get them. They did not get them because the gaps were not visible until after they had already killed. One of the survivors, a woman named Brenda, lived in the mobile home park with her husband and 2 children. She had moved to Albany from Chicago in 2008. She had never experienced a tornado. She did not know what a tornado warning meant. She did not have a weather radio. She did not have a television in the bedroom. She was putting her children to bed when the storm hit. She heard the wind. She felt the trailer shake. She grabbed her children and ran to the bathroom. The bathroom was in the center of the trailer. It had no windows. She thought it was safe. She did not know that a mobile home bathroom is not a shelter. She did not know that the thin metal walls and the particle board floor offer no protection against an EF2 tornado. She did not know that the bathroom is only safe if the bathroom is in a basement or a concrete building. She learned this when the wall collapsed. She survived. Her children survived. But they were trapped under debris for 45 minutes. Her husband was not in the bathroom. He had gone to the living room to close the windows. He was killed by a piece of flying lumber. Brenda later said that she wished she had known. She said she wished someone had told her that the bathroom is not enough. She said she wished someone had told her to leave the trailer when the warning came. She said she did not hear the siren. She said she did not know there was a siren. She said she did not know about tornadoes at all. She had grown up in a city. She did not know that Georgia has tornadoes. She did not know that March is the second most active month for tornadoes in the state. She did not know that the average warning time is 13 minutes. She did not know any of it. She was not alone. The Albany tornado exposed a knowledge gap that is not unique to Albany. A study published in 2009 in the journal Weather, Climate, and Society found that residents of mobile homes in the southeastern United States are significantly less likely than homeowners in permanent structures to know the difference between a watch and a warning. They are less likely to have a weather radio. They are less likely to have an emergency plan. They are less likely to know where the nearest public shelter is. The study was based on interviews with 1,200 residents across Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. The researchers found that the most common reason for not having an emergency plan was not laziness or denial. It was lack of information. The residents said they had never been told what to do. They had never received a pamphlet. They had never attended a safety seminar. They had never seen a public service announcement about tornado safety on television. The researchers concluded that the emergency management community was not reaching the most vulnerable populations. They recommended that public education campaigns be targeted specifically at mobile home parks. They recommended that park owners be required to post tornado safety information in common areas. They recommended that the information be available in Spanish and Vietnamese, the two most common non-English languages in the region. The recommendations were published. Some were adopted. Most were not, but there is another layer to the Albany tornado that is rarely discussed. It is the question of how the dead are counted. The official death toll is 8, but that number includes only those who died directly as a result of the tornado. It does not include those who died later. It does not include James, a 53-year-old man who had a heart attack while trying to board up his windows before the storm. It does not include the elderly woman who fell and broke her hip while running to a neighbor's house. She died of complications from surgery 4 weeks later. It does not include the man who died of a stroke while driving home from work during the storm. The coroner listed all of these as natural causes. The official records list the cause of death for the 8 victims as blunt force trauma, but the trauma of the tornado extends beyond the numbers. It extends to the man who could not get to his wife in time. It extends to the woman who lost her brother and then lost her job because she could not stop crying. It extends to the teacher who could not look at the sky without flinching for 3 years. The official toll is 8. The real toll is incalculable, and then there is the question of the mobile home park itself. The park was called the Kingswood Mobile Home Park. It was built in 1972. It had 62 lots. At the time of the tornado, 54 of them were occupied. The park was owned by a corporation based in Atlanta. The corporation did not respond to requests for comment after the tornado. The park manager, a local resident, had been in the job for 11 months. She did not have a background in emergency management. She did not have a written emergency plan. She did not have a weather radio. She did not have a list of residents who might need assistance evacuating. She did not have a designated shelter. She did not have a working siren. She had a phone. She called the sheriff's office when the warning came. The dispatcher told her that the tornado was heading toward the park. She did not have time to knock on every door. She did not have a public address system. She did not have a vehicle to drive through the park with a loudspeaker. She did the only thing she could. She started running. She ran from trailer to trailer, banging on doors, screaming for people to get out. She got to about 15 trailers before the tornado hit. She took cover in a ditch. She survived. She later said that she wished she could have reached more. She said that she wished she had been trained. She said that she wished the park owners had provided resources. She said that she quit 2 months later. She said she could not sleep. She said she could not stop hearing the wind. The park was rebuilt. It reopened in 2008. The new trailers are anchored to the ground with steel cables. The park has a community shelter. It is a concrete building with a steel roof. It can hold 80 people. It has a weather radio. It has a backup generator. It has a public address system. It has a designated manager who is trained in emergency procedures. The park now complies with the state law. It is safer than it was, but the families of the victims do not visit. They cannot. They say the park is a cemetery to them. They say the trailers are headstones. They say the wind still sounds like a train. They say they will never feel safe again. They say they hope the new residents never have to learn what they learned. The Albany tornado was not the deadliest of 2007. That was the EF5 tornado that struck Greensburg, Kansas on May 4th. It killed 11. It destroyed 95% of the town. It was covered by national media for weeks. It prompted a major federal response. It led to a rebuilding effort that made Greensburg a model of sustainable design. The Albany tornado was smaller. It killed fewer people. It destroyed less property. It received less attention, but in some ways it is more instructive. It was not an act of nature that was beyond human anticipation. It was a predictable event that was met with a predictable failure. The NWS had warned. The local authorities had been notified. The infrastructure was in place. But the infrastructure was broken, and the people were not prepared, and the coordination was absent, and the timing was unforgiving. The Albany tornado is a reminder that the weakest link in any disaster response is not the technology. It is the system. And the system is only as strong as the people who maintain it, the policies that govern it, and the community that trusts it. In the years since 2007, the number of mobile home parks in the United States has increased. The number of residents living in mobile homes has increased. The number of mobile homes destroyed by tornadoes has increased. The death toll has not decreased proportionally. The National Weather Service has improved its warnings. The lead time has increased. The false alarm rate has decreased. But the vulnerability of mobile home residents has remained stubbornly high. In 2011, a study from the University of Alabama found that mobile home residents are 20 times more likely to die in a tornado than residents of permanent homes. The study controlled for storm strength, time of day, and population density. The difference was not explained by any of those factors. It was explained by the structure itself. A mobile home cannot withstand an EF2 tornado. The wind speed that damages a roof on a permanent home is the same wind speed that picks up a mobile home and carries it. The only way to survive is to leave, and the only way to leave is to have a warning, a plan, and a place to go. The Albany tornado is a story about that equation. It is a story about the warning that did not come, the plan that did not exist, and the place that was not there. It is a story about 8 people who died because the equation failed. It is a story about the hundreds of thousands of people who still live in mobile homes across the Southeast, waiting for the next spring storm. It is a story about the sirens that may or may not work, the radios that may or may not be on, the doors that may or may not be locked, and the knowledge that may or may not be shared. That is why the Albany tornado still matters today, because the gaps have not closed. The system has improved, but the system is still human. The humans still forget. The budgets still get cut. The maintenance still gets deferred. The warnings still get ignored. The children still sleep through the storm, and the wind still comes.